Hello, this is Shari McGuire coming to you with another interview. I'm super excited to introduce you today to Ray Alkalai, who is the owner of Alkalai Financial Group. Welcome, Ray.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. You have a really unique business that I'm super excited to get to learn about as it relates to helping people in the senior market. So, can you tell us a little bit about your background and what inspired you to start your group?
So I'm going to start out with a disclaimer first that anything that I say on here has no financial advice and or any insurance advice because compliance makes me say that.
Sure.
It's general in nature. So I've been in the business since 2006-7. I got into the insurance and financial. When you get into that world, you learn over time what makes you happy, and it takes a while. And I landed on the income and care planning environment.
Okay, good. And so, is there any particular thing that motivated you to focus on the business owners and high income professionals with their retirement planning?
So that was my original focus. Now I focus on the general public. However, everything that we do applies the same way to everyone. And what I mean by that is everybody needs income when they're working, and the
Mhm.
day they stop working, they still need income. The problem is the world that we live in. The population is taught to save money, save money, save money, save money, save money. But at some point, they need to turn that into an income stream, and that's where the disconnect happens. And then on
Okay.
top of that, what I've realized over the years is that the income sometimes has to be turned into care funding. What I mean by that is when 70% of the population is going to need um, assisted living, memory care, nursing home, they're going to need that income to turn into that money. And
Right.
that also has to be planned. And that is something that is completely missing from our financial planning world today.
Definitely. And so, does that relate to the tax exempt income that you refer to on your website?
So yeah, so we look at the world in from a perspective of we want to focus first on income, then we want to protect the income, then we want to make sure that the tax implications are are good, meaning that taxes don't impact the income as much, and then we want to leave money behind called legacy, right? So everything that we do revolves around those four things, and then there's risks that we all have to deal with. Uh, Taxes, benefits from the government, um, um, inflation, volatility, longevity, all those things come into play. And the tax exemption is a target. So the goal that we have is to get everybody off the radar screen of the IRS
That's a good
legally.
thing. Legally, yes,
Legally.
legally, for sure, because that's the important part. Well, cool. So let's take an example. Like, say, mom needs to go into assisted living, and they learn about your services. Let's talk about that conversation, kind of how that looks.
So I would start the conversation actually a little bit earlier than that. So there's a progression in people's lives, right?
Mhm.
Let's start with the age group that starts thinking about these things. The 40-year
Okay.
olds, you know, their
Okay.
parents are in their 60s, usually middle to late 60s, and they're starting to have that conversation. I'm getting old. We call it, when you're in your 60s, um, you're in the go-go years. We call it the go-go years, the slow-go years, and then there's the no-go years, right?
Yeah.
So that conversation starts with the go-go years. Hey, we're going on vacations, whatever. What do you guys think? And the kids in their 40s are like, well, what do we know? We're in our 40s. We have kids to worry about. There's high school graduations, there's middle school graduations, there's elementary school. So the conversation has to start there. How do they mitigate in their 60s while they're still healthy the possibility that they're going to need that kind of a service, assisted living or memory care or nursing home? And how
Mhm.
do the kids in their 40s, if they start early enough, never have to worry about that when they get there?
Okay.
So, to answer your question, when it's a fire sale, what I mean by that is mom or dad is 78 years old and had a stroke,
Mhm.
went through a TCU, which is a temporary care unit, and now they have to go to a assisted living because a temporary care unit is, if I'm not mistaken, currently about $1,000 a day.
Okay. Spendy.
So you can't be there for very long. So at that point, you need to go to assisted living. How do you pay for that?
Mhm.
If you hadn't planned for that, now you have to use either savings, a house has to be sold. And if there isn't enough money, then you have to do what's called elderly waiver in Minnesota, which is a spend down. But if there's a second spouse, that spouse also needs to have income to continue to live.
Right. Which is hard then.
So that calculation has to be done on a fire sale basis. That's never a good situation. So the trick is to find solutions that bring you there without you having to burn through all the cash in a nursing home.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And are you able to help people in the fire sale situation, or you really need them to be planning ahead of that?
So we have solutions that can help the whole gamut. Sometimes they apply, sometimes they don't. Some of them have qualification. We're bringing back a product that was on the market for a while that was stopped a couple of months ago. It'll come back in hopefully by the end of the year. That will turn, for a lack of a better explanation, it'll turn $1 to spend like it's $3.
Oh, cool.
So it has the ability, based on mortality and actuarial tables, to extend that money to spend at a higher volume.
Okay.
I know that sounds complicated, but look at it this way. If you have $100,000 and your room at the assisted living is $10,000 a month, you're short 20 grand.
Yeah.
There's a possibility, based on qualifications, that $100,000 will spend like it's $300,000.
Nice.
So the question then is, what are the qualifications? And the answer to that is everyone is different.
Okay. So I need to talk to Ray.
Because there's no straight answer to that. Okay. I would like to say it's a formula, we plug it in and it goes. It's not. There's a medical process. There's medical interviews. It's a collection of things that happen in order to do that. And the qualification is you qualify. The question is, do you qualify for with what you have, or do you need more? Because everybody qualifies for that particular concept. In other situations, we have other avenues that will solve that problem, not to that extent. That's in a fire sale situation.
Okay. And so why don't you tell us a success story of a client who significantly benefited from your strategies that you've got?
So recently I had a client that had a house, no savings, and needed to go into assisted living because the children could no longer take care of the parent. Mm-hmm. And I'm saying this in a very general way to make sure that I don't give information that I shouldn't be. Yeah. And what happened was that they needed to sell the home in order to have money to pay for the assisted living. But the trick was not to burn all of the money from the sale of the home to do this. So the math panned out to somewhere in the range of the home sold for approximately was selling for approximately $650,000, if I remember correctly, and we used about 45% of that money to generate the dollars needed to go to the assisted living.
Okay.
Which means is the other 55% of the money stayed in the family's pocket.
Oh, that's good. And is protected from having to spend it down or anything?
Correct. They can do whatever they need to it, or if there's more need in the future, they have access to their cash.
Okay.
That's cool. And again, this was a fire sale environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
The same situation, another example would have been is family that planned in their mid 60s. They bought I'm going to say a bad word, long-term care insurance.
Okay.
Every time I bring that concept up, everybody says, I don't want that. It's too expensive. That is a true statement. However, there are different versions of long-term care. So there is a use it or lose it, the type that everybody says is expensive, which is true. The policies themselves are no longer as good as they used to be 20, 30 years ago, and they don't cover as much. There's an alternative version of that. It's called an asset-based long-term care. Okay. And then what that means is we convert an asset, financial asset, into a long-term care benefit. And basically, what we're giving them is more dollars for the dollars that they have. So the example that I was going to use is a couple in their mid 60s using $200,000 guaranteed themselves a long-term care benefit of $89,000 a year each in long-term care benefit.
Wow.
If they don't use the money, God forbid they drove down the street and had a car accident and both passed away,
Mm-hmm.
approximately $40,000 would go back to the family.
Okay.
So the idea is, as part of the planning process for the income that people need to depend on, we try to weave that in there. So first of all, it doesn't interfere with their income plan, and it gives them the benefit of a long-term care benefit. That's planning ahead.
Okay. Good. And so really, ideally, people like in their 40s, is that who should really be ideally like reaching out to you right now? I know not everybody's going to, but is that kind of like the ideal age to get started with you?
Anybody at any age can start the process.
Okay.
With the earlier you start, the more options we have.
Okay.
You don't necessarily need to buy a long-term care policy in order to have long-term care insurance. There are hybrid products. There are hybrid income products. And then there are all kinds of variations in between those things.
Okay. So lots to choose from.
There is.
Let's see. I guess what advice would you have for people who are starting to think about what's life going to look like as I age and need to move to that next level of care?
So one of the questions that I ask most of my clients is, if money were no object, what it is you would like to see your retirement. So if you're in your 50s and you're looking 40s, let's start with the 40s. You're looking out 25, 30 years. What do you see yourself doing in retirement? That's a hard thing to do, right? So you need to narrow that down. I want to live in, I'm just going to throw out ideas. I want to live in Arizona in a townhome. I want to have one car and I want to golf 3 times a week.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you need to cover, in my opinion, your basics at a minimum: food, clothing, and shelter.
Yep.
So you got to have to do the math backwards. So currently, if rent or mortgage is $2,000, what's it going to look like in 30 years? And start working yourself backwards into that math. That's what we help people do, because it's really hard conceptually to do that. If you're 60 years old, it's a lot easier because you're much closer to it, right? Because you know that your expenses are $3,000 a month and you're going to need maybe $4,000 in 10 years.
Yeah.
But when you're 40, that's a harder thing to do. And then you have to take into consideration, where is it you're putting your money relative to the tax code? We don't know what the tax code is going to look like in 10 years. We don't know what it's going to look like in 5 years. But in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, we don't know what it's going to look like. So you need to take into consideration what that tax code may look like and plan for that eventuality. So our goal is to get you to as close to 0% taxation as we possibly can.
Okay. Cool. My brain went in 100 different directions while you were talking, because it's so interesting to me to think about this stuff. And actually, really, one of the things that caught my attention was, since you are working with people who are business owners, a lot of business owners don't even think about how much money they need their business to generate. Because it reminded me of this. Someone put a post on Facebook to realtors. Hey, how much do you think a full-time professional realtor should make at the most, or at minimum, bare minimum? What should a full-time realtor be earning? And, I was like, okay, well, that depends on this and this and this and this. He's like, well, just pick a number. So I went through it and I was like, at a bare minimum, if you're single by yourself and you got expenses of about like $3,500 a month, you need $90,000 in gross commission income to be able to just survive. And I think that would shock a lot of people to realize that that's what it would really take. As business owners, just don't think that backwards way. You think, oh, I'll just go make this money, and then the paycheck comes in, and I go spend it, and like, oh crap, now I don't have any money again.
So what's interesting about what you just said is, on top of that, if you think about it, most business owners don't have a retirement plan. They think their business is their retirement plan. And I'm not knocking anybody that's a business owner. That is a really hard thing to do, to be your own business owner, because you're responsible for everything. However, They think the business is what's going to be that one day they'll get to retirement age and they'll sell their business. They'll be millionaires. And they'll get it. Statistically, that doesn't happen. So the question then is, what do you do in the meantime? Because if you have a 401k in your small business, there's costs involved.
Mm-hmm.
So then the question is, what's the alternative? And there are alternatives for business owners.
Okay.
But the problem is that again, Wall Street, the market, the media focuses on the things that are easy to throw at you. Go on CNBC, find out what the best stock is, put your money there, and it'll be great.
Except when it tanks.
Except when it tanks. So how do you build a retirement that's off the radar screen of the IRS? We also have solutions that give you a 300% match. It's a completely different conversation, but again, off the radar screen of the IRS. Also, if you didn't make it, what happens to your family? Also, if you died just a little bit, what happens to your family and your money? And what I mean by died a little bit, some people don't, when I say that, don't connect with that. I'll give you an example. A gentleman that was playing softball in his team, a lawyer, this is an actual case, was while batting, the ball hit his the left side of his head. Very successful lawyer. Now he's got a traumatic brain injury.
Yeah.
He can no longer work. He was making $300,000 a year. The man was 34 years old.
Oh my gosh. So young.
So now he can't work, and all the plans around what he had are no longer going to happen. His luck was that his law firm, on top of the group disability that they had, also made him buy a disability insurance policy that was separate of that.
Okay.
So he has income going all the way to 67.
Oh,
but then he's done.
Nice.
But then he's done.
Yeah.
So at least he can live. But all the plans that they had prior to that, because you can never match up 100% of your income, right? So then again, how do you mitigate for all those issues with $1? So we always tell people that we take $1 and make it spend like it's $3 or $4 in order for you to get all the benefits that you're looking for.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. And things like that happen just in an instant where your life is just changed forever. And you don't think it's going to happen to you, but it does. And I know my husband had a really bad staph infection a number of years ago, because it'd be 10 years ago now. And we went from life is just fine to him getting raced down the freeway with the lights going to the hospital for emergency overnight surgery. And that was crazy. And we almost lost him. And he was in the hospital for 5 weeks. And it's a long story. We won't go through the whole story, but in an instant, all of a sudden, I was like that single parent taking care of our 7-year-old and having to take care of him, and everything changed. And you just don't realize that's a possibility,
So the idea is that you have to build some kind of certainty into your plan. And if you ask 9 out of 10 people just on the street, if they have certainty, the answer will probably be no. Because most Americans, 90% of Americans, save most of their money in their 401ks. They don't look at what's in there. And that's it. If their company has some benefits, some of them buy it, some of them don't. And then the question then is, what happens on the back end? What happens when something happens? That's part of planning. And it's not that complicated for us because we see it all the time.
Sure.
The solutions are out there. It's about strategy, not about the specific individual products of people. Because people always ask me, well, what is it? Well, what is it? Well, the answer is it's a strategy, and everybody's strategy is going to be a little bit different.
Okay. Do you act more like a broker than a captive kind of person?
I represent multiple companies and have multiple solutions. Things that I don't do, I have partnerships with people that do it. Yeah. Because not everybody's the same, right? I don't like risk. Some people have no problem with risk. Some people have partial risk tolerance. So I don't. There's no such. To me, there's no such thing as a bad product. There's just a bad usage of a product.
Sure, that makes sense. How do you kind of see the landscape of retirement planning evolving in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I think we're going to have a major issue, in my opinion. Our national debt is going off the rails. Supposedly in 4 years, it'll be $46 trillion.
Crazy.
I'm currently 57. So my rationale is in 20 years, when I'm 77, I can't imagine what that number is going to be. Mathematically, they're going to have to charge somebody for that. So in my opinion, taxes have to go up. And it doesn't matter who wins the White House. It doesn't matter who wins in 24. It doesn't matter who wins in 28. The bill is going to will be coming due. We know taxes will be going up in 2026 because I can't imagine Congress extending what they called the Trump tax cuts in 2017. But even if they did, they're only going to extend it until 2028. So they'll go up in 2029.
Yeah.
So we already know that if they don't do anything, which, as we know, Congress is not very effective at the moment, or for the last 30 years for that matter, they're probably not going to be able to change that rule. So those tax cuts will be gone. Taxes will go up. And then when the bill comes due, they're going to have to increase taxes. So the impact on 401ks is going to be dramatic. So people say to me, well, aren't you paying less taxes in retirement? I say, well, if you go from the 10% bracket to the 15% bracket, is that a 5% change or is that a 50% increase?
Okay, that's interesting. So let's talk about that for a second, because I don't think everybody gets that.
Right. So everybody looks at it. I'm in the 10% tax bracket, which effectively is usually about give or take 5%, once you do all the deductions and all that. However, if Trump tax cuts go away, we're going to go from 10 to 15. That's technically, I mean, effectively, that's a 50% increase from 10 to 15. But everybody looks at it, well, it's only 5%. Yeah, but it's a 50% increase.
Yeah.
And there's thresholds. They will drop the thresholds. So then you're paying that 15% on more income. Am I making sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Our progressive tax code is very unique. I don't know that it's unique, but the way it works is like remember the test tubes we had in science class, right? So on a portion of your income, you pay 10%. On the next portion, you pay 12%. On the next portion, you pay 22%. On the next portion, you pay 24%. Well, that's going to change to 15 to 25.
Yeah.
12 and 22 are going to go away.
Yeah.
And that's the majority of Americans. We can talk about the higher level, but the bottom line is the majority of Americans are going to be impacted dramatically by this.
That's a huge jump. What looks like a 5% is really a 50%.
It's a 50% increase.
Don't think about it that way. So that's huge. Hopefully people caught that, because that is a big deal. Let's see. I know we got some time here yet, so let's keep going. Are there any innovations that you can see in the financial industry that's kind of exciting?
So companies have to come up with solutions to the problems we all have, right? Because otherwise they can't sell anything. So some of their innovations, I would say, seem to people like they're magic. Some of the innovations are magic, and I don't believe in them. And then there's others that seem like magic, and they're phenomenal ideas. So one of those ideas that I can throw out there is there are fixed products that will generate an income for somebody in their retirement. And when they end up going into a long-term care community, meaning assisted living, memory care, nursing home, it will actually double their income for a specified amount of time.
Okay.
So if they told you they were going to give you for your $100,000, $10,000 a year, now you're going to go into assisted living, it's going to be $20,000 for a few years.
Okay.
And there's multiple versions of that, and there's different variations of that. Not all work for everybody, so therefore you got to figure out what's the best course to take in order to get that to work.
Yeah.
So I think the innovations in that world is really, really important.
Okay. So I guess I'm kind of like thinking as people first meet you, is it like a lengthy interview process for you to understand where they're coming from, what their situation is, and how does that look?
You know, so my first interaction with anybody is a bunch of questions. I just ask them a list of questions that I have that I need answers to in order to know what they want. And through those questions, people will learn themselves what they want.
Yeah.
Now, once we're done with those questions, they'll know that if they want to work with me, and I'll know if I can even help them.
Right.
Because the idea is, and when you say lengthy, 20 to 30 minutes,
That's not so bad.
they should know if I'm the guy to work. After that, that's a whole different conversation, right? Then it's a collection of, well, we want a plan. Okay, well then, in order to do the plan, I need information. That's what takes a little bit longer. But the initial interview, they will know if I'm their guy. Do I have the answers for them?
Okay. And that's good that you're looking at it from a perspective of, can I help them or not? Because you're not going to take on someone just to take on someone, you know?
Listen, if a Jeff Bezos landed on my doorstep, I'd be very excited, but there's not a thing I could do for the guy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not that guy, right? So there are people that are good with complicated, if you have, multiple houses in different states, and you have all kinds of strange investments that are highly complex and investment properties and all kinds of, I'm probably not the guy for you.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're middle America, which is again going back to 90% of Americans, they have a house, a couple of cars, 3 cars, couple of kids going to college or in high school or in middle school, maybe a cabin, couple of toys. That's America.
Mm-hmm.
That's the majority that I can help. Now,
Okay.
there are solutions for people that are higher income, right? So if you're in that $300,000 income range, there are some very unique strategies out there that are not widely known that could be very beneficial to you.
Okay. But middle America is
Absolutely.
down further, and you're the guy for that. So that's cool. What do you think is the most rewarding part of your career?
Seeing the light bulb go on in people's heads when they realize how the math actually works.
Okay.
I said earlier, it's not that complicated because we do this all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But once they understand it, and the trick is not to give them a plan they don't understand. When they walk away, I want somebody to walk away and say, I can explain this to my next door neighbor.
Okay.
Usually you ask people, well, what's your financial plan? They're like, I don't know. They got me in this. They got me in this. They're doing this. I'm not really sure. I want them to be able to articulate clearly what it is they're doing.
Okay. That's good. That helps them from those people out there too that are like, oh, you're just getting scammed or whatever, if they can explain it, then they feel like it's honest and true, because there's a lot of yucky things out there too.
Yep. I want them to get it.
Okay. No, that's good. Any resources or tools you recommend for people to go, books or anything to understand tax-exempt retirement planning better?
So I'm a huge fan of David McKnight, The Power of Zero.
Okay.
He came into town in 2019 and trained a bunch of us twice.
Okay.
Patrick Kelly has a bunch of books out there. There's a gentleman by the name of Tom Hegna.
Okay.
Who does a very, very good information. Ed Slott for tax ideas. Ed Slott was on NPR. He did a show multiple times. I'm a huge fan of those guys. And I'm a huge fan of NerdWallet's retirement calculator.
Oh, okay.
Because because it lets you put in the information, puts in income, how much you make, what do you think the rates of return are, blah, blah, blah. And it gives you a visual of what we call the income gap. Because everybody's going to have Social Security if they worked.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then they're going to have some savings.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't really know what that looks like from an income perspective. This calculator gives you like what the number is, and then you start seeing the income gap.
Okay.
So then you recognize that where the problem is.
That's cool. I'm going to go play with that because I was actually working on an exercise recently of like, how much do I need to have to live on in retirement? And it's a trickier question when you're self-employed, I think.
Correct.
And so that'd be fun to go play with that. Well, cool. And how, any last things that you want to make sure that people hear or understand that you want to explain?
The only thing I want to get through to people is ask for advice. I know you can do it on your own. You can go online. I mean, there was an article recently. I think it was Motley Fool that said 88% you can beat 88% of the professional money managers out there by just going into what's called an index fund.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The problem with that is then what? So you put it in an index fund. It grew. Now what do you do?
Yeah.
Ask for advice. Even if it's not myself, ask somebody that deals with income planning.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Good advice. And how can people reach you if they want to ask you for advice?
612-217-0157.
Perfect. And
Best way to reach me.
I'll have that in the show notes as well too. So, well, good. Well, thank you, Ray. It's wonderful to talk with you and learn more about what you do and what you can offer people. So thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Have a great day. Click the end. My mouse isn't behaving here. Funny. Okay. There we go. End.